JavaScript. Okay, and we have discussed what kind of applications we can build using JavaScript. What kind of different applications we can build using JavaScript. Okay, this is what we have discussed in the last session. Right, guys? Okay. Now, in today's session, we will discuss some other set of concepts in JavaScript. But before we proceed with another set of concepts in JavaScript, I want you guys to install two softwares. Okay, install two softwares. I think already the first software everybody might have installed, and that first software is your VS Code. So I want everybody to install Visual Studio Code. Okay, in short, we can call this as a VS Code. Okay, so what is Visual Studio Code? It is an IDE. Okay, it is a tool where we are going to write our JavaScript code. It is a tool on which we are going to write our JavaScript code. I think almost a lot of people already installed this Visual Studio Code. In case if you have not installed, you have to install. Okay, how to install? I will let you know. Apart from this, you have to install something called Node.js. We have to install something called Node.js. Okay, let's see how we can install this both. So first, let me show how you guys can install Visual Studio Code. So for that, simply visit your browser. Okay, and just search for here VS Code download. Okay, just search for VS Code downloads. Click on enter. Whenever you click on enter, you will find here one link, download Visual Studio Code. Okay, the address will be code.visualstudio.com. Just click on this link. Okay, you will just navigate to the download page. Now, depending upon your operating system, you guys can install your Visual Studio Code from here. So just click on one link. Okay, one executable link will be downloaded. Now see here, one .exe link has been downloaded. Now once it is downloaded, just double click on that and just follow the instructions. Okay, just double click on that and just follow the instructions. So the instructions are very, very simple. Next, 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 finish. Okay, if you just open it like this. Okay, you will get this pop-up. Check this I accept the agreement radio button. Click on next. Okay, here you will get some checkboxes. Click on this first checkbox, create desktop icon, select it. Click on next. Then you will get install button. Click on install button. Your VS Code will be installed in your system. And once it is installed in your system, then you will find this kind of icon on your desktop. This is the icon you will find on the desktop. So if you find this icon on the desktop, it means your Visual Studio Code has been installed on your system. Okay, so this is the first thing what you guys have to install. Apart from that, you have to install something called Node.js. Now, what is Node.js? Node.js is JavaScript runtime. So what is Node.js? Node.js is JavaScript runtime, or I can say JavaScript runtime environment. Okay, it is JavaScript runtime environment. Now, if you want to execute your JavaScript program, whatever JavaScript code you will write on VS Code, if you want to execute that code, then we required one runtime, and that is JavaScript runtime environment, and that is your Node.js. If you guys know Java language, then in your Java language, there is something called JRE, right? it is equivalent to that JRE. Okay, in your Java language, there is something called JRE. So it is equivalent to that JRE. Okay. So JavaScript runtime. So we have to install this Node.js. So JavaScript code you can execute in two places. The first place is inside your browser. Second place is inside your Node.js environment. So these are the two places where we can execute our JavaScript code. So at initial stage, we are not going to use the browser. That is the reason we have to install Node.js so that we can execute our JavaScript code. Okay. So our JavaScript code, we can execute at two places. The first place is Node.js. Second place is inside your browser. So at the initial level, we are not going to use our browser. That is the reason we required Node.js to execute our JavaScript code. Where to write JavaScript code? JavaScript code we will write inside the IDE called Visual Studio Code. Where we will execute? We will execute inside the Node.js. We will execute inside the Node.js. Okay. So we have to install this both. So how to install your Node.js? For that, simply you have to go to your Google and just search for Node.js download. Okay. Now you will land on the first link here, nodejs.org. Click on this link. Now, once you click on link, you will navigate to the download page of Node.js. So here, based on your operating system, you can download it. Okay, here I am just downloading this mis.mis link. Now, once it is downloaded, just click on it. So once it is downloaded, just click on it. So let's go to download. Okay, just double click on it. Okay, this pop-up window will open. Click on. So let's wait. So here this next button will get enabled. Yeah. Now this next button got enabled. Just click on this next. Check this checkbox. Again click on next. Again click on next. Again click on next. Click on next. And finally click on install button. Finally click on install button. That's it. Your Node.js will get installed in your system. Okay, now already I have installed. So I'm just canceling this installation process. Now, once Node.js is installed, now we have to check whether Node.js is successfully installed in your system or not. Now we have to check whether Node.js is successfully installed in your system or not. VS Code we can check by seeing this icon. If you are able to see this icon, it means VS Code is installed. If you are not able to see this icon, then in the search box, here in the search, you can just type Visual Studio Code. And if you find here Visual Studio Code app, it means it is installed. This is the way how we are going to identify whether VS Code is installed or not. If you want to find out whether Node.js is installed or not, in that case, you have to just open the terminal. Nothing but you have to open your command prompt, open just terminal. And inside the terminal, you have to just use one simple command called node space -v. V stands for version. Click on enter. If you get here some version number, if you get like this some version number, it means Node.js is installed in your system. It means Node.js is installed in your system. Suppose if you don't get version number, suppose you are typing here node-v, and if you get something like this command, okay, let me just show you. If you get this kind of message, so let's suppose you are entering this command and finally you got like this message, node is not recognized as internal or external command. It means Node.js is not installed. If you use this command, if you get version number, it means Node.js is installed. If you use this command And if you get something like this message, it means Node.js is not installed. It means Node.js is not installed. So this is the way how we are going to check whether Node.js is installed in our system or it is not installed in our system. I hope, is it clear for everyone how to install Visual Studio Code and Node.js and how to check whether they are installed or not? Okay, it's very, very easy to install, guys. Just you have to follow next. That's it. Okay, it will just take less than 1 minute to get installed. Less than 1 minute. Okay, fine. Okay, now we know the introduction to JavaScript. We know how to install Visual Studio Code and Node.js. So after the class, just install this both the things. Okay, yeah. Now come back here. Now we are going to learn our first concept in JavaScript, that is variables. So anyone knows what are variables in JavaScript? Or variables in any programming language that you have learned? What are variables? Okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Let me explain you what are variables, guys. Okay. What are variables? Variables are the references. Okay. What are variables? They are the references which points to the memory location. Which points to the memory location. What are variables? Variables are the references. Basically, they are the references which points to the memory location. Okay. So in your memory, suppose you have RAM. Now inside your RAM, you can create some buckets. Okay. Something like buckets. Inside these buckets, we can store some data. Okay. We can store some data. You can store some data like this. Now every bucket will have some kind of address. It will have some kind of address here. It will have some kind of address. Okay. Now this address, we are going to store inside the references. So here, whenever I create one variable, for example, let's suppose here I am creating a variable like this, var a. Okay. Now this is a is variable here. Now this a is going to point. This a is going to point to my memory location, where some data got stored. So what are variables? Basically, variables are the references. They are just references. Inside variable, we are not going to store the data. Inside the variable, we will store the memory references, nothing but memory address. And in that memory address, we will store our actual data. So what people will think, we are storing the data inside the variables. Actually, we don't store the data inside the variables. Variables will point just to the memory, and your data is stored inside that memory. Okay, that is the actual concept. But just to make people understand in easiest way, lot of people will give the definitions like variables are container where we can store the data. Okay, this is what the common definition you will find in lot of places. But actually, variables are not containers. They are actually references which will point to some memory location. And at that location, some data will be stored. Now the question is, why do we require these variables? Why do we require these variables? Why do we require variables? Okay, this is the question. So indirectly, I can ask you, why do you want to store some data inside the memory? Why do you want to store some data inside the memory? If you want to store the data inside the memory, then you should know the address of that memory. Where to store that address? Inside something called variable. Okay. So before we answer this, can you guys tell me what is program? Can you guys tell me what is program? What is program? You might have heard like I'm writing JavaScript program, I'm writing Java program, I am writing C# program. So what do you mean by program? Yes, nice. So what is program? Program is a set of instructions, right? Program is a set of instructions to perform some action. What is program? Program is a set of instructions to perform some action. Now, to write one program, to write the program, first of all, we have to create one file. We have to create one file. Which file we have to create? Based on in which language we are writing the program. Which file we have to create means, for that we have to understand, to write that program, which language we are using. If you are using Java language, you have to create Java file. If you are using C# language, you have to create your C# file. If you are using JavaScript language, then you have to create JavaScript file. How to create JavaScript file? Just by giving the extension as .js. If you give the extension as a .js, then JavaScript file will be created. Now, once you create JavaScript file, inside this file, we are going to write some JavaScript code. Some JavaScript code. Now, once you have written some JavaScript code, now this file we are going to call as a program. This file we are going to call as a program now. Which program? JavaScript program. Now, why we are going to call this file as a JavaScript program? Because inside this file, we return some instruction, we return some code, and those instructions or code will do some kind of action. Those instructions or code will do some kind of action. Okay. So here we have created JavaScript program. Now, can you guys tell me, can we execute this JavaScript program? Can we execute this JavaScript program? Yeah. Now, whenever you are executing your JavaScript program, tell me, what do we call to that program? Whenever your program is in the executing state, or whenever your program is in the running state, what do we call to that program? You might have learned in your colleges, any program which is in running state or any program which is in the executing state, what do we call to that programs? To those programs we call process. Process. Okay. So what is process? What is process? Okay, it is one of the interview question. What is process, or what is the difference between program and process? So what is process? Process is the running state of program. So whenever your program is in the running state, at that time, that program we are going to call as a process. We are going to call as a process. Okay, remember this word. In case if you guys are thinking to learn Node.js in future, in case if you are planning to learn Node.js in future, then you should know the concept of process. What is process? Process is the running state of program. What is program? Program is the set of instructions written in your JavaScript language to perform some action. Program is a set of instructions, or you can say code, or you can say statements, okay, written in JavaScript language to perform some action. And if that program is in the running state, then those programs we are going to call as a process. We are going to call those programs as a process. Okay. Now, whenever your program is in the running state, at that time, to perform some action, you might require some data. You might require some data. Whenever you want to do some kind of action using your JavaScript, you might require some data. Maybe that data is used to do some actions. Maybe sometimes after doing some action, some new data might get generated. That data you might need to store somewhere. You need to store somewhere. So whether you want to utilize the data or after executing the program, you might generate some data, whatever that might be. Finally, you required something where you can store the data. Okay. So whenever you get a requirement where you require the data while executing your program, whenever you get a requirement to store your data, whenever you are executing your program, at that time, you required something called variables. At that time, we required something called variables. So why do we require variables? Variables required to store the data while executing the program so that we can utilize that data to do some kind of operation. So why do we require variables? Why do we require variables? Okay, this is one of the interview question. Lot of people know what are variables, but why they require variables, people will not be able to answer. So why do we require variables? Variables are required to store the data in the memory while executing the program, so that we can utilize that data to do some action. Or after executing the program, we might require to store some output. So, or else after executing the program, some output might get generated. That output you might want to store somewhere, where you can store inside your variables. Okay, understood? What are variables and why do we require variables? So here we have discussed 4 interview questions. What is variable? What is program? What is process? Why do you want variables in the programs? Okay, these are the different interview questions what people are going to ask, especially for the freshers. Especially this question will be asked to the freshers. So do you guys have the answers for all these questions? Do you have the answers for all these questions now? Okay, so don't copy your sentences from the internet. Try to give your own answers, guys. Don't try to paste your internet question answers on the chat. Okay, now let's come back here. Now let's try to understand how to create variables. Okay, and have the patience. Just focus on what I am teaching. The people who are new, for them I am saying focus on what I am teaching. Okay, so let's go step by step. It's not possible for me to teach entire JavaScript in one day. So let's try to understand now how to create variables. How to create variables in JavaScript. To create variables in JavaScript, okay, we have to take the help of something called scope statements. We have to take the help of something called scope statements. To create variables in JavaScript, we have to take the help of something called scope statements. And there are 3 scope statements in the JavaScript. How many scope statements we have in the JavaScript? We have totally 3 scope statements in the JavaScript. The first scope statement is var, one more is let, one more is const. So there are totally 3 scope statements. And using these 3 scope statements, we can create variables in JavaScript. Nothing but we can create some references in the JavaScript. The syntax to create your variable. Syntax. To create the syntax, to create the variables in your JavaScript, then you have to follow certain rules. Syntax means rules or grammar. Okay. In general, syntax means grammar. So in our languages, we will have the grammars, right? In English, we will have grammar. In Hindi, we have grammar. In the same way, in every programming languages also, if you want to give some instructions, you will have certain rules. You will have certain grammar. And those grammars, technically, we are going to call as a syntax. Now, how to tell that create a variable? For that, we have to first use scope statement. Whatever scope statement you want, you can use it. Space, your reference name. Nothing but your variable name. So here, let me just write variable name. Okay. Then semicolon. Semicolon. You have to add semicolon. This is how we create a variable. Example, var is one of the scope statement. Space, give some name to your variable. You have to give some name to your variable. For example, I am writing here CT. So what is CT? CT is the name of your variable. Then semicolon. What is var? Var is a scope statement. Okay. What is scope statement? That we will learn after few sessions. Here, it is not possible to make you understand what is scope statement. Because to understand scope statement, you have to learn so many concepts. So as of now, blindly you believe that there is something called scope statement. Var, let, const. We can use any one of the scope statement. Var, let, or const. When to use var, when to use let, when to use const. What is the difference between them? All those we are going to learn in the coming sessions. Maybe after 5-6 sessions. We will have a separate topic called scopes in JavaScript. In that topic, we will learn about this scopes concept. What is the difference between var, let, const, when to use var, when to use let, when to use const, all those points we will discuss. So as of now, you just remember how to create the variable. So var, then your variable name, or else you can use let, your variable name. So this is how we create the variables in JavaScript. And this part we are going to call as a variable declaration. We are going to call this as a variable declaration. Variable declaration. Variable declaration means we just created one variable. Created one variable means internally inside your RAM, one bucket will be created. Some bucket will be created. And this bucket will have some address here. It will have some kind of address. And our variable will point to that address. It will point to that address. Now, inside this bucket, we don't have any kind of data. It's empty. We did not store any kind of data. So this is how we create the variables in JavaScript. So let's see how we can create variables in JavaScript practically now. Let's see practically. So to create variables practically, what you need to do, you have to follow few steps. First step, create a folder inside any drive. First, create one empty folder in any drive. Second step, open the folder in the VS Code. In the VS Code. Open the folder in the VS Code. Third step, create one JavaScript file. Create one JavaScript file. Fourth step, create variables. Create variables. Okay, so these are the 4 steps we have to follow. First, we have to create a folder in any drive. Then we have to open that folder in the VS Code. Then create a JavaScript file in the VS Code. Okay. Once you have created your JavaScript file, then we have to create a variables in the JavaScript file. So let's follow all these 4 steps. So for the first, go to any drive. So here I will just go to some drive. Okay, maybe here I'm going to E drive. I have something like training. I will go to Ashok IT. Maybe here something like main batches. Yeah. So I just went to some place. You just go to any place in any drive, create one folder here. So I'm just creating one folder with the name like yes2, nothing but session 2, and I will add today's date. That's it. The first step is create one empty folder. Folder is empty. So first step is done. Okay, second step is we have to open the folder in VS Code. There are 2 ways to open this folder in VS Code. Okay, there are 2 ways to open this folder in VS Code. Let me explain that both the ways. The first way is you can just go inside this folder. Here, just click here. Okay, remove this date, select this entire path, remove that path. And just type here CMD. Type CMD, click on enter. Now your command prompt will open. Okay, now command prompt is opened in your folder location, at your folder location. Here, just type one command, code space dot. What command you have to type? Code space dot. Click on enter. Now see, your VS Code will open. In that VS Code, that folder is open. Now here, VS Code is open. And inside that VS Code, your folder is open. This is the one way to open your folder in the VS Code. What you have to do, let me show one more time. Go to your folder, open that folder, go inside your folder, select this path, remove from here, type CMD. Your command prompt will open. Then here type code space dot. Now that specific folder will open in your VS Code. Now see, S02_08 folder has been opened. Okay. Another way is what you guys can do. Simply go to this desktop, just click on this icon. Whenever you click on this icon, your VS Code will open. Now this is how the VS Code will open. Close this file. Now here, if you see, there is no folder open. Now click on this file option. Click on open folder option. Now navigate to the path where you have created your folder. Just navigate to the path where you have created your folder. Okay. Here I have created the folder S02. Select this folder. Click on select folder. Now that folder will open. This is the second way. Now, if you see, two VS Code tabs are open here also, here also. I'm just closing one part. Is it clear for everyone how to open the folder in the VS Code? First two steps are clear for everyone, especially for the people who are very new to the JavaScript. Okay. After opening the folder, third step is we have to create one JavaScript file. Now, this is your folder. Now, if you keep your cursor here, you got three icons here. You got some three icons. Click on first icon. Click on first icon. It will ask you to give some name for your file. So I am giving here variables. Some name I am giving. After giving the name of your file, just add .js. That's it. And click on enter. Your JavaScript file is created. Now this is your JavaScript file. If you want to create text file, simply click on this file option. Give some name like demo. If you want to create text file, we will say .txt. Text file is created. .txt means text file. .js means JavaScript file. You can close it if you don't want to use. Now inside this file, we have to create variables. How to create variables? Using your scope statement. First line should be scope statement. Var space. Just give some name to your variable. I'm giving here name like CT. Then semicolon. Now adding the semicolon is optional in JavaScript. Okay. It is recommended to add, but if you don't add semicolon, it's okay. It will work in JavaScript, but it will not work in your Java language. Their rules are very strict. Here, rules are not that strict. We have some optional here. Some few things are optional in the rules. The first one is semicolon, but better to add the semicolon. Semicolon indicates the end of first instruction or end of instruction or end of a particular code. Semicolon indicates end of statement or end of instruction or end of code. Okay. So see, I have created my first variable. How many variables you can create? You can create any number of variables. I can create one more variable, var name. I can create one more variable, var something like email. I can create one more variable, var x. Okay. Not only with var, create with let also, let y. Let something like here phone. Okay. So like this, we can create any number of variables in our JavaScript file. Understood how to create variables in JavaScript file? Okay, as of now, for a few sessions, we will just go with var scope statement only. We will go with only var scope statement. It means if you want to create variable, we will use var scope statement. That's it. We will not use let or const. We will discuss about let and const after a few sessions. Okay. So here I am just creating the variables with var and let. Understood how to create a variable? So this process of creating the variable is called variable declaration. This process of creating the variable called variable declaration. Technically, I can say that I have declared here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 variables. How many variables I have declared? Totally 6 variables I have declared. Okay. Semicolon is not mandatory in your JavaScript. Semicolon is not mandatory. Okay. Even if you don't add semicolon, you will not get any kind of errors. But it is recommended to add. It is always recommended to add. So always add the semicolons. Okay. Now let's try to understand how to store the data inside the variable. Okay, how to store the data inside the memory where variable is pointing. Okay, if you want to store the data in the location where your variable is pointing, how to do that? How to do that? So it's very easy. For that, you have to follow simple syntax. What is that syntax means? Variable name equal to operator, nothing but this is called assignment operator, then data. Your data. What is the syntax? Syntax is your variable name. This is assignment operator, and then your data. Your data. Okay. So remember, this is called assignment operator. The name of this is, you should not call equal to. In our normal languages, in our schools, we used to call this as a equal to. But when it comes to JavaScript, here we have to call this as a assignment operator. Assignment operator. Okay. So this is how we are going to store the data inside the memory where our variable is pointing. Okay. So how to do that? For example, here. So simply we have to write CT equals to, here you have to add your data. Okay. So here I am just adding some data like Hyderabad. Here also name equals to something called, here I am just adding something like Raj. Email equals to, here I am just adding something like raj@gmail.com. Here X equals to 100. Here I'm just adding Y equals to something like 101. Phone equals to, here I'm just adding some data. So this is how we assign the data to our variables. Okay. So here I just shown you how to assign the data to your variables. Actually, we are not assigning the data to variables. We are storing the data in the memory, and our variable is pointing to that memory. Variable is pointing to that memory. But people will get confused. That is the reason lot of people will say, okay, we are storing the data in variable. That is what people will call. But technically, that is not right. Technically, we are storing the data in the memory, and to that memory, our variable is pointing. Okay. I hope you guys understood how to create variables and how to store the data inside that variable. How to create variables and how to store the data. Okay. Is it clear, guys? Just focus on these two terms. Did you understood this part or not? Don't run. Okay. Don't go ahead. Just focus on what I am teaching. Everything will be covered. Okay. Now this process. So here, let me add the example. Here I'm just saying CT equals to Hyderabad. Okay. In the double quote. In the double quote, I am adding the data coil Hyderabad. Okay. Now this process of storing the data inside your memory is called variable assignment. It is called variable assignment. Okay. This process is called variable assignment. Okay. Now if I go back here, now this is variable assignment. This is variable declaration, variable assignment. If you created a variable and in next instruction, if you are adding some data inside that variable, that process we are going to call as a variable assignment. And I want everybody to remember these terms. variable assignment. You need to remember this term called variable declaration. Now, these terms in future I will use directly. Whenever I use the term variable declaration, internally you should understand, okay, one variable is created, but we did not assign any data to it. It means we did not store any data inside that variable. If I say that, okay, I am doing variable assignment, it means you have to understand, okay, already one variable is created. Now in that variable, we are storing some data. We are storing some data. So variable assignment and variable declaration. We have one more, something called variable initialization. Suppose if you are creating the variable and at that time only if you are storing the data, then that process is called variable initialization. What is variable initialization? Variable initialization is the process of creating the variable and at that time only storing the data inside that variable. Okay, it is a process of creating variable and at that time only storing the data inside the memory where that variable is pointing. Or in short, I can say creating the variable and storing the data in that variable at that time only. So syntax is something like this. The syntax you have to follow something like this. Scope statement, variable name, equals to your data. Okay, example, var city equals to Hyderabad. Okay, this is called your variable initialization. This is called variable initialization. If you are declaring the variable and assigning the data to that variable in the same line, then it is called variable initialization. Okay, variable declaration means just created the variable. Variable assignment means we created the variable already, but now we are storing the data. If you just combine variable declaration and variable assignment, then it is like variable initialization. It is a variable initialization. Okay, so in your interviews, they can ask, what is the difference between variable declaration and variable initialization? What is the difference between variable declaration and variable initialization? Okay, I'm just adding the interview questions also. So while discussing the topics, we will discuss the interview questions also, so that you guys can understand on specific topic what kind of interview questions can come, what kind of interview questions they can ask. Now, in my company, a lot of time I have taken the interviews, and I will ask this question to the candidates who are completely freshers, because I want to know whether they are technically strong with the terms or not. They know the meaning of the terms or not. And I have seen lot of people will get the confused between declaration and initialization. Sometimes they answer vice versa. Instead of explaining variable initialization, they will explain the concept of initialization in declaration. They will explain the concept of declaration inside the initialization. And I have seen a lot of people will do this mistake. Now see, just in one topic, that is variable topic, this many interview questions can come. This many interview questions they can ask you guys. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Rakesh, you are not the one person who is experienced. There are a lot of people who are completely freshers. So we have to cover in that way as well. Okay. For experienced people, they will never ask the questions on variables. For the people who are experienced, in your interviews, they will not ask the questions directly on the concept. They will ask the questions on your projects. They will ask you the questions indirectly. So they will never ask the questions directly. Yeah. So now if I come back here, now can I create here one variable, something called var, here something like ID, and can I assign some value here? Now this process, this entire process of creating the variable and assigning the data to it is called variable initialization. This is called variable initialization. Suppose if I just declare the variable, now this is called variable declaration. Suppose already the variable is declared. Now to this variable, if I assign some data, now this is called variable assignment. We are just assigning the data to this variable. This is variable initialization. This is variable declaration. This is your variable assignment. Is it clear for everyone? These three terms, understood how to create variables and how to assign the data? Okay. So guys who are very freshers, who don't know how to write your JavaScript code. So I am just explaining everything step by step. Okay. Here we have just learned how to create variables. In today's session, we just focused on how to create variables. Okay. Now let's come back here. Now we know how to create variables, right? So let's assume that we created some variable. Let's assume that this is our variable. We have just created a variable, and inside this variable, we are storing some data. We are storing some data like this. Now, can you guys tell me how many types of data we have? Do we have different types of data? Do you think that data will be of different types? Yes. When it comes to programming language, data are of different types. Data are of different types. Okay. Some data can be in the form of numbers like this. Some data can be in the form of characters, nothing but our alphabets. Few data can be in the terms of or in the combination of characters and numbers like this. And few data in our programming language can be in the terms of true or false. Can be in the terms of true or false. Okay. So in our programming language, if you take any programming language, your data can be of different types. Few data can be in the form of only numbers. Few data can be only in the form of characters. Few data can be in the form of character plus numbers. Few data can be in the form of something called true or false. True or false. Like if I'm asking a person is married or not, is married or not. If I want to know whether the person is married or not. So can I store the data in the form of true or false? If I say true, it means person is married. If I say false, person is not married. So few data we can maintain in the form of true or false. One more, suppose I want to know the placement status of a student. Placement status, whether the student got placed or not. So here, can I store the data in the form of true or false? True means already he got placed in some company. If I say false, student is not placed in any company. So like this, I can store some data in the form of true or false. What kind of data you can store in the form of numbers? User phone number, user ID, right? User address, like home number, flat number. All this kind of data will be in the form of only numbers. Few data will be in the form of characters, the combination of characters. Nothing but your combination of alphabets like city name, person name, right? School name, college's name, office name, department name. So like this, few data will be in the combination of alphabets, characters, combination of characters. So like this, in your programming language, the data is being divided into different types. Okay. So now these types will vary programming language to programming language. The data types will vary programming language to programming language. What is the meaning of that? Whatever data types you have in the Java, you will not find same data types in the JavaScript. You will not find same data types in the C#. There will be little bit change. So programming language to programming language, data types will change. So in our JavaScript, there are totally 8 data types. There are totally 8 data types. It means your data has been divided into 8 different types. And all these 8 data types are further divided into 2 categories. All the 8 data types are divided into 2 categories. The first one is primitive data type, and one more is non-primitive data type. So how many data types we have in JavaScript? We have totally 8 data types in JavaScript. Okay, we have totally 8 data types in JavaScript. And all these 8 data types are divided into 2 categories. The first category is primitive data type and second category is non-primitive data type. Out of 8, 7 comes under primitive data type. 7 comes under primitive data type. Okay. And only 1 data type comes under non-primitive data type. Only 1 data type comes under non-primitive data type. Okay, let me list out all the 8 data types. So data types are number. Number is one data type. We have something called string. We have something called Boolean. Okay, we have something called undefined, null, big int, symbol, and object. These are the 8 different data types that we have in the JavaScript. These are the 8 different data types. What are the 8 different data types? Number, string, Boolean, undefined, null, big int, symbol, object. Out of these 8 data types, first 7 data types comes under primitive type. Only object comes under non-primitive type. First 7 data types comes under primitive data type. Only 1 data type, that is object, comes under your non-primitive data type. Now in your interviews, they will ask, can you list out all the data types in JavaScript? Can you list out all the data types in the JavaScript? This is one interview question. Second interview question, in how many categories your data types are divided? Can you tell me what are the primitive data types? What are primitive data types? Or can you list out all the primitive data types? Or what are the non-primitive data types? Okay, these are the different types of questions they can ask in your interviews. Can you list out all the data types in JavaScript? In how many categories data types are divided? What are primitive data types? Or can you list out all the primitive data types? Can you list out non-primitive data types? Again, some more questions will come. What is the difference between primitive data type, non-primitive data type? What is the use of number? What is the use of string? So like this, so many questions will come. So to answer those questions, we have to learn. We have to know what are primitive data type. Why all these 7 are called primitive data type? What is non-primitive data type? What is the difference between primitive and non-primitive? Which kind of data or which type of data we are going to call as a number type? Which type of data we are going to call as a string? Which type of data we are going to call as a Boolean? Okay, that is what we have to discuss now. Okay, so that part we will discuss in tomorrow's session. So in tomorrow's session, we will discuss about the data types in detail, like what is number, what is string, okay, what is Boolean, which data types, which data comes under number type, which data types comes under string type. So all those things we will discuss in tomorrow's session. So as of now, you just remember there are totally 8 data types in JavaScript. 7 comes under primitive, 1 comes under non-primitive. And all 8 data types are divided into 2 categories: primitive data type, non-primitive data type. Okay, so this is what we have covered in the today's session. Remaining part of data types we will cover in tomorrow's session. Okay. Okay, here in JavaScript, we don't have something like int, we don't have something like float. Okay, float, int are the data types which you will find in C# language or maybe in Java language. In JavaScript, we don't have any data type like int or float or char. We don't have any short, we don't have any byte. Okay, these all are the data types which you will find in Java language. So when it comes to JavaScript, data types are different. Govind, I will let you know after a few sessions.